In a few months, many of us will cast a vote for the next President of the United States. How will we determine our choice? Will it be based on experience, intellect, ideas, philosophy, moral beliefs, plans, programs, or personality? Surprisingly enough, in the relatively short history of televised presidential debates, bringing the candidates live into our living rooms has had a dramatic impact on election outcomes. We absolutely saw that this year during the Republican debates. To understand the history, it was in 1960 when Congress suspended Section 315 of the Federal Communications Act to allow the first televised presidential debate. Prior to the first 1960 debate, the experienced, well-known Vice President Richard Nixon was considered a sizable frontrunner over the young, inexperienced Massachusetts Senator John F. Kennedy. However, television delivered us a handsome, tanned, Harvard-bred savvy Kennedy versus a pale, sweating Nixon. Paradoxically, those who heard the debate on radio declared Nixon the winner, while those who saw the debate on television pronounced Kennedy the victor. With some 77 million Americans, 60% of the U.S. population tuned in, the fate of the election was sealed. In 1964, incumbent Lyndon Johnson, who did not want to debate Republican challenger Barry Goldwater, sent a signal to Congress that he had no interest in another suspension of Section 315. That election year saw no debates. Not surprisingly, repeat contender Richard Nixon also saw no need for debates in 1968 against Vice President Hubert Humphrey. He felt the same way in 1972 with challenger George McGovern. So Americans went a full 16 years before a repeat of the 1960 televised debate took place. In 1975, the FCC changed its interpretation of the law, paving the way for the 1976 debate between President Gerald Ford and challenger Jimmy Carter. Ford, trailing in the polls, welcomed the decision, but in the end, his debate gaffe may have sealed the deal for Carter. Ford, in commenting on communism in Europe, said, "Poland is no longer under communist domination." The erroneous statement became the defining moment of the 1976 debate series. In 1980, only one debate between President Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan was held. It took place late in the contest, which was in a dead heat. The power of two simple lines delivered by Ronald Reagan carried him to a landslide victory. First, in response to one of Carter's claims, Reagan said, "There you go again." And in his closing comments, Reagan asked the rhetorical question, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" That said it all. In 1984, President Reagan was the decided frontrunner against former Vice President Walter Mondale until he faltered during their first debate. In the second debate, Reagan did not fare much better until his now famous quip when asked if age, he was 73 at the time, should be a consideration in the election. Reagan, with a straight face, answered the question by saying, "I will not, for political purposes, exploit my opponent's youth and inexperience." After Reagan's retirement in 1988, Vice President George H.W. Bush and Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis squared off. It was the emotionless response from candidate Dukakis to CNN's Bernard Shaw's question about how he would react if his wife Kitty was raped and murdered that unfortunately defined the man. The second debate in the 1992 election year was a town hall meeting between Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and Ross Perot. President Bush was seen looking at his watch. This single action painted Bush as being distant and out of touch with common people, placing him in stark contrast with challenger Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton. It is surprising to think that such small, seemingly insignificant actions, words, or phrases could change the outcome of who becomes the leader of the free world. Ironically, it is Richard Nixon who may have best defined this phenomenon when he said, "In the television age, the key distinction is between the candidate who can speak poetry and the one who can only speak prose." It's going to be interesting to see what happens as we approach the election this fall, and who speaks poetry and who speaks prose. I'm John Longstreet with another edition of the Longstreet Beat. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.